Ethan, welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. Tonight I have a special treat, Ian Hatton, and this is great because a lot of people may not be aware of some of your stuff, but go, oh, I know that. You were the guitar player in Bonham, the original Jason Bonham band. He's had a few of them,
Right.
and you guys came out and here's the caveat. I'll say that Bonham band was allowed to sound like Zeppelin. It had Zeppelin cred without getting in trouble for it, unlike like Kingdom Come or other bands. Like it was allowed. So,
Yes.
which was
Yeah.
interesting, but you guys really didn't sound too much like Zeppelin if you dug into the album more, and if you listened to the second album even more. That was a right turn. I'd like to talk about that. But and then you've done a lot of other stuff, and we want to get to it now. But a little bit your inspiration. I don't usually do a deep dive like this, but there's not a lot out there on you. You know, could you share with your early musical yearnings in your guitar and your love of music, how you kind of got from A to B and headed towards the bands?
Um, Early, very, very early days. Actually, well, honestly, my very first sort of inspiration record was Queen, Queen One. Um, and then, I mean, condensing stuff. I got very much got into blues and 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 more, I guess, more progressive rock. I was into, um, Soft Machine and
Okay.
you know, um, Brand X and kind of that sort of that
I
sort of
thought you had like in your early music, like even listening to Bonham, I thought in your souls, I felt there was like a jazz influence with jazz mixes in a progressive and prog. I mean, because the songwriting is
yeah,
similar.
yeah,
So that's
yeah,
kind of what I was hearing because it felt like it was a little more complicated and a little more than just blues. It felt like listening to your licks. There's a little extra.
I that was, that was my, that's where I sort of lent to, and then I got sort of scooped up a little bit by the, if you like, the sort of the Honey Dripper, the sort of local. I was lucky enough to be in, um, be a kid, and sort of like 17, 18, and play with those people. And so that got me more into the sort of blues, rock and roll,
Right.
the authentic sort of, learning that, the real way, as it were. Um, and then, yeah, so the, I mean, the bottom thing was a good combination because, like, Jason was totally loved, like he was totally into American, like,
Yeah. Metal. Yeah.
yeah. And I hadn't even, like, he played me like Van Halen, you know what I mean? I hadn't heard of, not I hadn't heard of it, but I wasn't listening to any of that
Right.
stuff.
It was not you're influencing you. You're aware of it, but it was not like in your household where you're like, oh, look at that riff.
Yeah, exactly. I was listening to Freddie King, Pink Floyd, and Jeff Beck. You know what I mean? That
Yep.
was my kind of stuff. Um, and John, the keyboard player in Bonham, he was similar. He was more of a jazz kind of background,
Okay.
but so it was an interesting combination for the band as well. We weren't just like a bunch of Van Halen fans or something.
No, you weren't. And even if you listen to the song, it feels the atmosphere of the song is more than anything. The feeling, even for like the biggest Zeppelin part of the "Waiting for You," sounds like it's much more of the atmosphere of the sound. It's not even like a Zeppelin riff. It's just kind of a feeling of like in the evening. It's just a slight little thing. It's not really even a riff of
Yeah,
that.
that was the hope. For it to, for the feel, like we were, like I said, we were all actually big Pink Floyd fans. Obviously Zepp fan.
Well, yeah,
Like,
but
I felt like it was somewhat a mixture, which, every good band is a
right.
good combination of a bunch of influences. You know what I mean? It's like,
I
yeah,
mean,
that's what
you
you
guys
hope.
didn't have a chance though, right? Out of the gate. I mean, obviously, they're like, oh, we're going to do Bonham, but you guys all had different influences. And you guys all sound differently, and like even half of the first Bonham album does not sound like it'd be. You know what I mean? Sounds like a different rock record to me. And been lucky enough, at least online. I never saw you live. I saw there's some VHS shows up online, and they're a different show. It's not like a heavy metal show at all. You know.
No, no, what we weren't quite. We were sort of in that sort of like hair band, if you like,
Right.
metal. But I never really thought we were that. To me, we were a rock and roll band,
Yeah.
with different influences. And yeah, we were the Zeppelin thing. Obviously, we all love Zeppelin and Jason, in particular, but different, obviously a different thing for him. Um, but I felt that we kind of, I always tried to kind of keep that sort of play that walk the fine line of like, you know what
Yeah,
I
you
mean?
do. Yeah,
That's
I
too
do. I
much.
do get that. And you guys didn't get beat for it. You're one of the few bands I've ever heard that had any kind of influence that really got me beat for it. Because as you listen to the album, like going back and listen to it, I'm like, man, I don't really hear a lot of like members like, oh, it's the Zeppelin man. Like I had to go back and listen to the first one again because I've listened more like Mad Hatter later in life, enjoyed it much more. But listening to it, like taking it apart for this, I'm like, Jesus, I don't really hear much Zeppelin at all, except for Jason's drums. He's very similar to his father because, you know,
Right.
genetics are great.
Yeah.
But the music, and then am I right? Actually, in your website you show something. I'm sorry, I actually up here because I wouldn't forget. Like did you co-produce? Oh, you co-wrote for the first album, but you co-produced the second album.
We all kind of chipped in and on the second album. Yeah, we was all kind of. The first album was Bob Ezrin, which was
Pretty awesome.
fantastic. Yeah, and for me, I mean, for me, I was always the one left, and like I'd stay for the mixes, and I'd stay.
Right.
I was a student,
Right.
probably a good guitar player. I just loved studios, and I was into that. Um, and Bob was just fantastic, and I learned so much, really, in a short space of time. Um, More psychological probably than than even sounds, but just a combination. He was like really good without you really knowing it.
Okay, look, I gotta ask you a question, more of a side note before we go. Do you feel like once you were in the band, or actually once you started like learning more recording, don't you think it gave you a different perspective on songs and songwriting? Like, like when you hear a song and like how it goes, you're like even when you go to write a song, you're like you kind of know the process in the band, like what the studio can do. Kind of like an extra skill set, to add to it. Because I know when I went to college for recording, when I got done with college in the recording, I was like, oh, like songwriting was so different all of a sudden.
Right, and it's and it's this again. It's that same. It's it's like with songwriting, the you get that riff or that part of a song in your head, and the first challenge is actually being able to recreate
Yeah,
that.
replicate that sound exactly.
And then, which that was like a huge learning curve. It's like, yeah, you have all these ideas and great riffs or whatever, but you've got to make them come to life.
Right.
And then as you say, and then translate that again into recording, because it doesn't always necessarily, it's not like, oh, got a great riff, just go and record it.
It's good. I think it's good whenever I see a guitar player that moved on and also does production, but they've learned from as they make albums and from like a lot of great people like Bob. You learn so much about people skills, working with songwriting, how to deal with people. I've always said it's kind of like part of the biggest skills of being a producer, besides learning the the patch bay, which is always the worst. But and splicing, that was always the hardest too, right?
But yeah, that's yeah.
I did that. It was hard. But learning all that is just to learn to not go in it too deep into a song, like too overkill on like losing on sounds and stuff. Like if you have a good producer and you do a couple albums, you learn to be like, oh, you have to cut it at a certain point. You have to, you just can't spend days and days doing something that's,
No,
you know,
it's been really lucky to work with like Bob Ezrin and then Ron Saint Germain. Um, did a bunch of, well, still do stuff with Ron. Um, Great producers, and it's like nearly everybody you work with, really. If you haven't done what you were going to do, if you haven't got it in two, maybe three takes, whether it's a lead vocal, a guitar solo, or a track, it's like you're probably not going to get it. You know what I mean? It's like if it's taking too much work, then it's not
Right.
right. You know.
And I think getting sound is kind of hard too. I think the most forgiving part for me to get the right sound is drums in the studio, because I think you need to do drums. Need to do them live. You need to do them in the studio, and you got to produce them right. They can't sound like, I don't know, like oatmeal boxes. They can't sound. I still hear people doing that. I'm like, oh, it's killing me. I hear these great songs, and I hear these horrible drums still to this
Yeah.
day. You know what I mean? I'm like, what a great song. These drums are horrible.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, back in those days, it was like, okay, we've got like, a couple of days to get the
yeah.
drum sounds,
And they got crazy. Like SM58 here, then we're gonna put a pillow here, then we're gonna make this here off the back here, off the ceiling, and
We had
you know,
I mean, for the first album, we had a PA in the studio, and all the low end of the kit was going through. Was basically mic'd up, and being played through a PA, so to get that sort of
that
kick
loud
drum
sound.
sound. Yeah,
That's crazy. When I was actually learning, one of the things I also learned when my teacher said, when Neil Peart recorded, they were actually taking like a wireless, like a taping like a mic to him, like a small single one. So when he was drumming, and you're also getting the sound.
oh right, from
I don't know which albums or how to confirm it, but that was like we had a class and we were talking about that option. I was like, that's a fantastic idea, you know.
yeah.
But I digress. So when you guys, so you hopped into Mad Hatter, and now when you got a little more production, the songwriting changed totally. I imagine you first came out, the band was kind of wanting you guys to be a certain thing, but by the second album, and you guys toured a little bit, it feels like you guys were more your own band again. Kind of like you guys were establishing your own sound and your own who you guys are.
For Mad Hatter, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it was really that was you know what it was just the progression from the first album. Um, it was just unfortunate. It just took us way too long to make the record, and then
yeah.
we just got wrapped up in record company stuff, and then it just came out too late, and which was a shame.
A real shame because, um, was it '92? Was that actually the right date? Did right '92 it came out? Let's get
Yeah,
'89 was the first album, then '92, and
yeah,
'92 is when everything came up. Um, that's when all the bands started getting hit
yeah,
in '92, and that was like, because that was another album that could have just been its own rock album. You could have a little more time. You could have established a different style of music of not being in that genre. Maybe carried on longer.
that was the biggest disappointment. That again, it's hindsight.
Hindsight. Well, no one
I
could.
don't know. There are a few reasons why the album took so long, but it's some of it record company, some of it band. It's just
You guys were young too. You guys were in your 20s, right? Early 20s. So I mean,
yeah,
jeez.
yeah, mid 20. It's like if we, that if that album had to come out, maybe like 91,
Right.
it would have been just that enough to sort of, I
Yeah.
think, to have established us.
I think so too. I think it'll give you more legs to at least go
Yeah.
on and have some kind of thing. But after that album, so I mean, that's pretty much the demise of the band shortly after that, right? How long do you guys get to tour at all?
We toured that. We went out with Emerson, Lake and Palmer actually.
That's
Uh,
pretty cool.
and
Once
so
again, very different than the hair band, so it was very
yeah, and I mean, it was honestly, it was kind of a half-hearted attempt by the record company. They'd kind of like
yeah.
everything was changing in the music scene, and I feel like it was just a bit of a you know half well, we'll put this out, and we'll do this video, and
Yeah.
you
That's
know,
better than some bands. By '92, I know a lot of bands just got pulled off tours and just got lost their contracts, and
yeah,
they were having good sales and they weren't having a good tour. So,
yeah.
you know. But after that, and I'm looking over here. So you actually did some other bluesy, big, legendary bands. You worked with Paul Rogers, and you did some Honey Dripper stuff. Can we expand on some of those? Those are some pretty cool things.
Yeah, the after the Bonham thing, we did Motherland, which was well, like in between. I think it was actually after the Bonham. Yeah, it was after the tour. Me and Jason did the Paul Rogers Muddy Waters tribute to Muddy Waters album, which was great.
It's a great album. I didn't, in fact, I didn't even realize it was you at first because at the time I didn't even go through like looking because there's like a million people on the album credited. I didn't even dig through and put two and two together. I just like I'm like this is a good album.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun because it was basically Jason, Pino Palladino, and myself and Paul, and we we sort of arranged all the tracks.
Yep.
I played I played guitar on all of the tracks to sort of put them down and put everything, and then all the other guitar players came in. Some of my guitars are left. Some tracks it's all my guitars. Some tracks it's a couple of bit, you know what I mean, or no
Yeah.
guitar. So I didn't really know what the outcome would be, but I'm pretty well weaved through the whole album, and none of the parts really change, which was nice. So,
It's a great album too. So that's pretty cool. So from there, what were you guys doing? So you guys, do you and Jason keep going on after that too? Were you guys still trying?
we did Motherland after,
Excuse me. Yeah.
which was still on the same label, different singer, Marty Fredrickson, who went on to write hits for like
Aerosmith.
Aerosmith, Faith
Buck
Hill.
Cherry recently. I hear
Yeah,
his name a lot lately.
yeah. I mean, he's super talent, but he was very much of that. Like he came in and he's one of those songwriters. He's brilliant, but it's just like, okay, this is what we need to write for, you know, for today
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so I love the album in the end. It was great, but it still was like it wasn't really that kind of band that the Bonham was,
Right.
which was us truly just playing, you know.
Jamming it out and writing.
Yeah, it lost that, even though it's still, it still had, all of our heart and soul in there, but it just there's
And
that.
other heart and soul too. That just
Yeah,
wasn't the same kind of band you wanted. That's all. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
he's good.
And
He comes in and kind of juices up songs and tweaks things out really good. But if that's not the band you wanted, I mean, no matter how good somebody is,
yeah,
it's
I
just not
feel
that.
like, yeah, it's just at the end of the day, it's really just not quite, it's not sincere, is it? You know what I mean? It's just like, it's Brit like Marty is, as crikey, he's gone on to be like hugely successful.
Yeah.
Um, but he's brilliant at just going, okay, I'll go and work with Foreigner and write songs for Foreigner and then Aerosmith, and which is amazing. But I don't even know how he does that.
It's interesting. He's kind of like a psychologist and like a puzzle. Like obviously doing songwriting so well, he's a puzzle maker, a puzzle builder, where he can kind of take all the pieces and look at it and go, yeah, it just needs this here. Like he just figured out the recipe to kind of
Right.
to juice up the song that might just be you're like, oh, it's good, but it's just missing something. He's got the ingredients,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a great talent. So let's keep going. So what happened from there? Is that when you guys finally started to separate a little bit?
So yeah, from after that, Jason wanted to do. Yeah, I think that was kind of after that. Jason wanted to do like the In the Name of My Father album, I think,
Yep.
which he wanted to go on into the, and I just never. We always, he's Jason is, I was his best man, for Christ's sake. I
Right.
mean, we're best friends, but still, I was in the Bonham days. I was known as like the Zepp police, if you like, because it'd just be like if it was too close, it was like, we can't do that. And so I always wanted to try and be us, and so to do a out and out Zeppelin album and stuff, it wasn't for me, and nor could I in my playing. I'm not going to try and play like Jimmy. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's somewhere you don't go.
I hear you. It's actually kind of good to have that Jason had a good friend that he trusted also as a sound meter to be like, hey, maybe we should pull back, or this is my opinion. You know what I mean? It's always good because you always have people, in your ear. I'm sure he had lots of people in his ear. So
Oh,
it's to have a friend or a mate be like, you know what? Nah. You know.
Yeah, no, we used to, it was, and we did try and, but that, like as I said, when he wanted to do that was just like, okay, I want to go, I want to do the Zepp tribute, basically, um, which just wasn't something that
Right.
neither I wanted to do or I would be good at. So
So
that
at
was
that
kind
point,
of where we parted company, if you like. Not certainly not as friends, but just as players.
right, right, right. I mean, he's continued on to be his. I mean, I think he's established himself now to be his own person. You know, you can't
Yeah,
compare. And it's hard to compare an artist anyhow. But it's like earlier, like Dweezil Zappa, Frank Zappa. Dweezil is his own fantastic artist onto his own. Obviously, it's the family lineage, or with uh, what's to say, Eddie Van Halen's son, or who's fantastic. We saw him play guitar. Like they've got it in them, but they're not their parents. They are their own talented artists that they, how it goes.
right,
Um,
exactly.
but for you, where'd you go? Because at this point, you were a lone gunslinger there, guitar slinger.
From there, I went, basically formed a band, like again, compressing things a little bit, but
Yeah.
basically moved to New York and formed a band called Lux, um, which did, we had a moment. We did a couple of albums, and it was a great band. And ironically, we've all been in touch recently about doing something. It's a bit of
Oh, very cool.
the uh, the bass player is now playing guitar in Enough's Enough. and, yeah, we're still in touch. The singer I was married to at the time, so that's a whole other thing. But
Oh, wow.
we're still we're good friends. So, and she's doing good. So, um, and then from that lasted probably 6 years, maybe.
So that was in the 90s, right? Probably up to the end of the
Yeah,
90s.
late 90s, mid to late 90s into the yeah, because we had the Motherland thing, and then actually me and Jason went back out. We toured with Paul Rogers after Motherland. We made the album
Yeah.
before, and then we ended up a bunch of touring with him, um, which was great. And then yeah, then did Lux thing, and then from that I worked in a studio up in Massachusetts called Longview.
Yep.
Um, Great, fantastic studio, and I started to just well, actually, I went there to do work on some stuff. Wasn't Lux. It was just with Katrina Chester, who was my partner, my wife at the time.
Hmm.
Um, so we were doing like a solo thing for her, um, and the Bonnie, the woman who owned Longview at the time, she sort of came to me. She's like, "Have you?" He said, "Like, you ever thought about producing other people?" And I was like, "No, no." I'm like, I said, "I'm not. I could do that." And she's like, "But that's what you're doing. You're producing this." I was like, "Okay." So I worked with this. I think that I did an album with Eileen Rose, um, and then I just started working up at Longview doing production. Some things I was playing on, some things I was just producing, um, and that's where I met Steve Thompson. Did a
Yeah.
bunch, did a Kitty album with him, a Cheap Trick album, engineering, which was all great.
Yeah.
And at the time I was there, we started doing some wacky stuff with Bose Corporation
Yeah.
and recording for them. And then I met, this is all, um, yeah. Then I met this guy from PBS, and I always wanted to do like TV stuff, film, and he gave me did a couple of little shows for him, um, and again condensed, but um, so I from there I got hooked on the sort of the film TV,
How
you
does
know.
that work? Do you get like a treatment for an idea and you bring a sound in, timed out, or are you actually getting some rough footage with an idea that they want you to come in and you have more free reign?
It all varies, and it's, you know, like say with that stuff which was PBS, it would be pretty open, but you knew it's PBS, so it's got to be, you know,
Right.
it's be have a certain tone, so you got to, um, you know, toe the line with that kind of thing, which is still fine. But the film work that I, you know, I've done quite a few films now, and they you know, one guy I've been working with for a while, and done 3 films with him, and it's nice because he just kind of he may have some music, he may be like, I really want, you know, the temp tracks, so you might be trying to, not copy, but you want the same vibe that the temp track gave, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then other parts of them, you know, you just score in, or the whole movie, you know. And with him, with some of that stuff, I which I've never done before, which I literally just watched and played, and which is pretty scary
It's
to
amazing
just,
that you just kind of fell into these jobs.
yeah, yes, it's, I mean, it's there, obviously there were gaps of times and different things
Right, right,
going,
right. Yeah, I get that.
but but um but yeah, I luckily sort of just kind of, a little door opens somewhere, and you're like, oh, I just wander down there and, you know, see where that
Right.
takes me. And obviously, because I, you know, because I can engineer, produce, play guitar, I can program things, and, you know, then you become like a useful, especially in that world. It's like, you know, you're a one-man show basically. When there's more money, then you can hire people to do, you
Right.
know, what they should, but, you know, some of the times there's not, so you know, you playing keyboards and guitar, and you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
it's fun.
It's interesting because only a handful of guitarists I've talked to from that time period, and it's a lot of them are because a lot of them didn't go crazy, didn't hear a lot about them, you know, partying too hard or being so notorious. They just kind of did their music, geeked out in the studio, learned a lot about production, and just kept their head down and kept working. And by reputation and just kind of doing it, these other opportunities have presented themselves by other people in the industry. That, hey, you know, and there's only a few people I've heard do that, and you're like one of them. You know, just
Yeah,
great.
it's yeah, I think it's, I mean, I love studios, so it's like that's, um I miss, I miss the Longview days where there was a bunch of us in the studio, and you know, because it's, I know when, you know, when the whole COVID thing happened, and I got a film to do, and you know, everybody's going on about what's going to happen, and it's like jobs, and it's like,
Yeah.
that, that's my job description. I sit in a room on my own for like most of the
Right.
you know what I mean? So it's like, it was quite funny really, but not funny, but you know what I
No, no,
mean.
it is pretty funny because it's like how actually for me I do IT, so right, I was actually being trained for work meetings for Zoom, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden I'm like the most in demand person because I have been working with Zoom prior. Now everyone's kind of got their feet into it. You know what I mean? I can't tell you how many people doing this show I've helped to do learn Zoom. You know, so it's, you know, it's how technology just falls in your lap at times. It's pretty funny. But I have seen there are some clips you have to play out a little bit though, right? You still play out.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's a few interesting things. Three, was it probably like, probably 4 years ago, I did a tour with Debbie Bonham. Um, um, Ironically, her husband, who's a guitar player, her guitar player, was playing with, he does like a free tribute thing for with Paul Rogers.
Yeah.
So then, so they got this show opening. There was Ann Wilson, Paul Rogers, free, flipping the bill, with Jeff Beck. And so me and Debbie got to open up that tour just as a duo, like, so just
Wow. That didn't
I,
suck.
no, it
Paul
was fun.
Rogers and Jeff Beck. Oh,
I know it was. I mean, he's my my all-time favorite guitar player. So it was
yeah.
to hear, you know, to see him play every night was just ridiculous. Um,
Right.
and great to play. Debbie's like an amazing singer, so that was a fun sort of. I think it was like 2 month tour in the summer, doing like sheds basically.
That's really cool. And
It
because
was
you're
great.
producing and you're your own boss right now, right? So you could kind of do that.
Yeah, it worked out, um, and then um, this this past July was my big big 60 birthday, so went back home to have a bash there and played with, which was basically some of the original members of the Honey Drippers, um, and and including the member of the Honey Dripper who got up and did a couple of songs too, which was fantastic. But now they're coming out here to do the same here for like 3 gigs in New York in November.
Like with Robert or
Not with no no no. It's
not
totally
anymore.
totally a
Totally.
fun thing. Obviously, would be lovely if Robert was around, but it's the whole birthday. It was a fun
Yeah.
thing,
It sounds like fun.
and he got up and did a couple of songs, which was fantastic. And
You have a better chance of him doing a Honey Drippers than you do having doing a Zeppelin though. So
yeah, yeah,
vocally, it's a little bit different. It's the perfect range for him right now.
yeah. And we ended up doing like a Cliff Richard song, and it's like, he always wants to do something that's
Yeah, he's never stopped surprising me. I just saw him online doing a guitar solo. Like now he's out there, not gonna slow down.
no, he's not, and
He
writing stuff.
shouldn't have to. I guess he's just too much talent to stop. That's really cool. So where are you at now? I mean, you told me you got a couple things going on.
Yeah, I've basically got another film starting in about the next couple of weeks, which should the summer's been sort of quiet, but bit of playing, been doing some blues gigs locally, um, and just doing that and brewing a bit of beer.
Yeah,
And
let's talk about that. What happened? So how'd that happen?
it's well, it's like a lot. It's an age old sort of thing of living in America, and every time I go home, it's like the beer got so much better in America in terms of like craft beer and everything,
Yeah.
but still would go home and be like, oh my god, I can't find a beer like this. It's just driving me crazy. So I I've got a local brewery back home in Bewdley, and talk to them about it. I'm like, you know what, could I, this is a fair few years back, and I'm like, could I make this? And they're like, yep. and so yeah, very long story short, but I sort of kept at, I kept at brewing, and as a hobby basically while I'm doing
Right.
stuff. And then the pandemic sort of came along, and I was like, all right, I could dig out my basement and get licensing and put beer up, put proper English beer, cask ale at my local pub. So I actually did manage that.
So you're still doing it now? Is it still
Yeah, it sells really well actually. So it's like I've got the studio upstairs, a brewery downstairs, and it's like sort of a perfect musician's place, right?
it really is. That's crazy. I mean, and it's funny because like beer and there's like certain things like like when you start something, you're like, well, I'm gonna have a garden. And next thing you know, you've got way too many tomatoes. So you're at a point now, like it gets too much for one person to consume. You're giving it away. You start making beer, you start brewing, you start getting it done easier, cheaper, do bigger batches. Next thing you know, you're like, you gotta go somewhere with all the beer, or you just become a super alcoholic because
I
you got a lot of beer there to keep going.
it was funny because there was a moment there where I had like way too much beer in the house, but
Right.
right now I don't have any of my beer because it's selling. It's which is I guess a good thing probably.
That's crazy. So are you like the other one making it? Is it just you, or do you have like somebody actually helping
No,
and doing
no,
it?
no. I've been just doing it on my own. So it's 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 kind it's like music. I like making things. I like making like there's a I don't know. I feel like there's a recipe to everything. And I know it's completely different to music, but it's still
But it's not if you think about
it's
the
artistic, creative. It's making something,
well,
and
that's what
I
happened. I'm sorry, like a lot of people, same thing. When music stopped, all of a sudden people are painting. How many guitar players and musicians are painters now? A lot of them are cooks.
right, because you
It's
need to do, yeah. It's like doing the hired gun thing. It's like I could never, I'm not particularly good at it either, but um, I just couldn't like to go out on the road and just play somebody else's music, which the Paul Rogers thing was, if you like. But that was Paul Rogers, so it was stuff that you grew up with as a kid.
right.
You know what I mean? So to play All Right Now was like, who wouldn't want to do that?
Well, it's not really a cover song if you're playing with the artist. You're helping them
Yeah,
do some
but
music.
it but it's at the end of the day, after a while of doing that, you're you're out on the road and you're playing like 1 hour a night or whatever you're playing, but it's not your music. So you're not, I don't feel like after a while it's like, okay, this is good, but I'm not really doing anything. You know what I mean? I'm just
Yeah.
playing, and that I suppose that depends on just what type of person you are.
I think it depends on the artist because there's no right or wrong. But just like you'll have like singers that will sing and be in bands, but then you'll find people that do like American Idol, which to a lot of people feels no music. It's just more of a performance with a good voice. I'm not slagging them, but it's way different than singing and writing and having a band, and you know what I mean. It's like two different
Yeah,
things. Or if you're in a tribute band, some people love playing the same songs over and over again. You know what I mean? And some people are like, I can't. It's just who you are. There's no right or wrong. It'd be boring if everybody did the same thing. You
yeah,
know,
exactly. It's one of those, isn't it? It's just, yeah, I don't, I never have, even when I know, learning to play, I was not a big, I, one of the first things I did was record my own chords onto a little cassette player so that I could play to it. I didn't used to sit there and work out other people's stuff. That, I mean, obviously I did, but not like friends of mine who know,
right?
like, all like the Hendrix songs and the Robin Trower songs and all this. And I didn't know, I was like, I don't know all those songs. But I'd sit and put chords on an old little cassette player, and then play to that.
Well, it's giving you your own
Right.
sound too.
Yeah.
What are so people can obviously you're selling you can people get your beer? I just are there certain bars they can get your beer, and then let's talk that and also about if they're interested in any kind of production. Are you producing for people? Are you doing guitar for people? Are you what I'm saying, like for tracks, or a lot of people have different services that they're doing now.
Yeah, I've worked with a couple of people around here. I mean, definitely, as everybody is now. You kind of you're doing a bit of everything.
Yeah,
It's like so. Um, I yeah, I'm playing for people on tracks. Still producing it, although that's it's again, it's tough to get the sort of budgets to be able to do what you want to do. Um,
right.
you know, work with some local artists, which has been good, which has been fun. Um,
People can reach out to you on your website. You have a great website actually to take a look at. I have it pulled up here. I want to talk about it for a minute too. I want to direct people to it.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. You can get me through the website. It actually needs updating badly, but it is everything's there.
right. So you have a section broken down as film and TV. I'm kind of just half looking over it because I can't remember off the top of my head. You've done a lot of name stuff, but not a lot of people that people are going to recognize the names of these shows and you know people that you've worked with over the years. So it's not like they're no namers either. People can be like, oh, I know this. You
No, I
know.
mean I've done stuff like I worked with Bill Moyers on that Rikers Island documentary, which
Yeah.
was fantastic to, um,
to write.
from, just done all sorts from with the PBS stuff, doing like re rewriting the sort of Monty Python uh, intro. You know what I mean? So it's just
Yeah,
these
it's great.
wacky projects which have been fun.
Dr. Wayne Dyer. I mean, so you've worked with a lot of very different stuff, which is kind of fun, and it's all here for people to check out. And you also have a breakdown of your music, which we kind of broke down a little bit tonight. But you have a lot of you have a lot of stuff on there for people to check out. It's really kind of cool the way it's set up, and the songs. Um, you have a breakdown of your history, obviously who you are. Some nice shots and a lot of stuff you've done over the years. It's hugely the large thing. Um, and then the contact for you, and so people can reach out if they want to get you for anything.
Absolutely, yeah.
Um,
Composition, guitar, production, beer, you
Beer, everything,
name
right?
it. Yeah.
That's a full night, right? Sit down, have a beer, do a song, record it. It's all done, full
I
service.
mean, really, that where I am there, it's like it's just the perfect place. It's
Yeah, you're like I'm actually getting ready to go do catering. I'm gonna get some catering
yeah.
stuff I gotta after this tonight's show. Just as my last thing, I have to check off my list, so I'm a full service center, right? That's awesome. I want to thank you for coming on. This has been great.
No, thank you.
You know, I loved your music early on. It was great to rediscover you and then be like, oh, actually, because I'm aware of some of the other stuff you've done and not knowing it. And that's one of the fantastic things about music and that I've discovered with the show, sharing with musicians and other fans that there's so much out there that's happened during that block of time, especially when music took the weird dip. And you being a musician, I actually could say, like when you were in the '90s doing your Lux, it was a weird time for music. Like I don't think anybody knew what they're doing. You're wearing shirts, so with long sleeves over short sleeve shirts. People are dressing
Right.
backwards. People, you can't be glamorous. You're not doing guitar solos anymore. Even though you've been doing guitar your entire life, you're just doing chords and you're throwing your guitar, breaking it. It was a weird world for music. And there's some great pop songs that were in all that, and a lot of great bands came out of it too.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but a lot of garbage bands came out too, just like in the '80s and '70s and '60s. It's just life. But it was a weird time. It's almost like music didn't have an identity back then. That for me, I had a hard time putting a fingerprint on the identity of music, and it feels like the looks and imagine how quickly things changed from like when metal and rock went out, and then it kind of came grungy. But then, like you said, Kitty came along. That wasn't grungy, but it was kind of like a metal, but not like a metal core. Everything changed was just in flux, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I mean, well, not ironically, but the metal sorry, seems to um that seems to like it's such a tight knit kind of
Community.
uh, community. Yeah, like that. It's I almost it's kind of weird. Like when we were a rock band, which was like the mainstream thing, if you like. And
Right.
there was
Right.
jazz, and then there was blues, and there was metal, and all of those jazz, blues, and metal, they're still playing the same. They're still there, but the
Yep.
rock thing just kind of changed. Um, it's sort of interesting.
It is, and luckily we had things like Europe and Asia really supported, in Germany a lot of the rock things, the festivals, guitarists, jazz music, a lot of outside, we could save the popular music of the USA for those years. Otherwise, they just would have annihilated your career 100%. You could go other avenues. I think a lot of those now have finally established themselves. Like rock's in a good place right now. We're just doing flyout gigs and there's fun. There's no competition really now. Some of these bands are putting out some of their best albums ever. They're getting paid better without being on a tour bus. Not for everybody, but I think
Right,
it's actually locked itself in. Like the world realizes the flexibility and how to go. I think it came up on top. Considering you can't be on top because you always fall down, but it has a nice spot now. You know,
right. People are back out again, which is good.
yeah, it's got a seat at the dinner table now.
Yeah,
you, you're not just going to sit at the top. You will always fall if you're at the top. Every 10 years, it goes. But if you sit at the same table, you just move your chair when things get kind of. It'll be okay. You know, that's it. All right, man. I want to thank you. This has been great. You being on the show. I appreciate it, man.
that I appreciate it too.